Laptop, check. Cell phone, check. Internet connection, check.
The era of the digital business rockstar has arrived.
Live, work, and play anytime, anywhere.
Few have cracked the code. Today, you will be one of them. Now, from an exotic location somewhere in the world, business maverick and global lifestyle expert on a mission to help struggling entrepreneurs reclaim their time and lifestyle. Here's New York Times best-selling author, Daven Michaels. This is the Jetset Entrepreneur.
Hey there, it's Daven Michaels. Welcome to the Jetset Entrepreneur. And if you're joining us on webinar, welcome, because you are live with us on the Jetset Entrepreneur. And if you're listening to us on podcast, well, that's awesome. You're a subscriber. And if you're not a subscriber yet, please go to iTunes and make sure to look up Daven Michaels and subscribe to the Jetset Entrepreneur. And also, if you are listening to the podcast right now and you want to be with us on other channels where you can actually see us live, participate, ask questions, see the video feed, then go to davenmichaels.com and get yourself on the list. Just subscribe, and that way we will let you know every time we're live on the Jetset Entrepreneur. And the Jetset Entrepreneur is really for entrepreneurs and business people that want to live their life and their business by their own design, rather than having a life and business that their business dictates for them. And every week I have guests who are really leaders in business, movers and shakers, people that are really making it happen and living life and living their business on their own terms. And today I'm super excited to have my guest with me, Harry Rozakis, and Harry is the author of the book Dodging Bullets, Shooting Back. And Harry, welcome to the Jetset Entrepreneur.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for being here with me. And you're out in North Carolina today, yes?
I am indeed.
Awesome. And Harry, you and I, we're kind of new friends. We had a chance to meet at Jeff Hazlett's C-Suite Network. And if you don't know who Jeff Hazlett is, he is a pioneer, a business maverick, but in the C-suite, for larger corporations. And he had a show on Bloomberg. Now he has his show on his own network. And he's a great friend, and he's about to be coming on our board of directors at 123 Employee, which is really, really cool. And you and I had a chance to hang out. I got a chance to check out your book. And I asked you if you'd come on the show, and you agreed to do that. So I want to thank you for being here with us.
Hey, it's absolutely a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And Harry, you have had quite a career. And you have been the CEO of publicly traded companies, and you were in the semiconductor business, doing business in Asia decades ago, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I'm just totally intrigued. And could you maybe share with everyone a little bit more about your business background?
Sure. I don't want to bore you going too far back, but
very exciting.
I actually started traveling to Asia in 1976 when I worked for a company called Allied Chemical that probably most people don't even remember anymore. The only way you remember it is on New Year's Eve in New York City when the ball drops. Yeah, that used to be the Allied Chemical building. But long story short is they gave me put me on a plane and sent me to Asia, where the semiconductor industry was just a fledgling little industry. And I started doing business with clients all over the Asia Pacific region. In 1981, I had the division of Allied Chemical I worked for was sold and became an independent company. Actually, was sold to Tom Watson's grandson. And I ended up moving
for people who don't know, you want to kind of explain who Tom Watson is?
Sure. So Tom Watson's founder of IBM and ran the company for many, many years. His grandson, John Irwin III, had a little venture capital firm called Hillside Capital, and they bought out my division from Allied Chemical. Great group of guys. When I was working for them, I moved to Singapore basically to set up Asia Pacific operations, because it became apparent very early on that the semiconductor industry was going to be moving to the Asia Pacific region. Something you know quite well, outsourcing was beginning to emerge. U.S. semiconductor companies were setting up facilities over there. And as a young guy of 27, 28 years old at the time, I got to go over and set up Asia Pacific operations. And little did I know at that time that was really my first entrepreneurial experience. Company basically said, go and set everything up. And granted, I had the opportunity to do it on other people's money, but it was a great experience for me. It really put the international bug in my being, and spent 5 years living in Singapore, and literally have worked in places in like Singapore and around the world for the last 40 years. And I could go on and on, but maybe I'll pause for a second in case you got some other questions.
Well, yeah, I'm going to have you go on and on. So first of all, when you landed in Sing in the 70s, in 76, the Singapore of 1976 bears zero resemblance to the Singapore of today. Zero resemblance.
There was no Changi Airport in 1976.
Yeah. I mean, it was like the rest of Asia back then.
Oh, it was still a third world country. It was an emerging country. Lee Kuan Yew, who had taken the country, of course, into independence, was still leading the country. Mm-hmm. But it was the Singapore phenomena was something amazing. And just even in that 5 years alone, mm-hmm. the changes that I saw that country make were phenomenal. Of course, over the last 30 plus years, the changes have just been amazing.
It's unparalleled. Now, at the time when you were there, so Singapore at the time was kind of a benevolent dictatorship, right?
It really was, and it was really quite interesting to watch that country transition. The thing about somebody like Lee Kuan Yew is, although he had an iron hand, he was really the true Machiavellian, and he really knew how to give and also to take what he needed to make that country what it is. And there were rules that people always laugh about. You weren't allowed to chew gum. Cosmopolitan magazine was banned from Singapore. Mm-hmm. There were some pretty funny things in those early days. But look, it was that kind of leadership that made Singapore what it is today, and certainly made it a very good friend of the United States.
Yeah, and pretty incredible. If you've been to Singapore, you understand what Singapore is today. It's one of the most modern, amazing cities, in my opinion, on the planet. It is the crown jewel of Asia, and it's very rare for like a third world country to become first world. It doesn't happen. Developing nations develop for a long time, and what they were able to achieve is kind of like Dubai. 30 years ago, it was just like the rest of Asia, a developing nation. Today, it's this just amazing place. I mean, the architecture alone is like considered to be some of the eighth wonders of the world, if you will. I mean, it's really an incredible place. It must have been really cool to be a part of it, back then, to just be a young kid figuring it out with a big bank account right behind you, a big bankroll, right?
Well, it's true. It's true. There's a couple of amazing things. Number one, first of all, Singapore itself, the adaptability of both the people in the country has been incredible, because when I was there, it really was a manufacturing culture. I mean, U.S. semiconductor firms and high-tech firms were going to Singapore to do manufacturing because it was low-cost labor at that point in time. Yeah. Anyone who knows Singapore today knows the last thing you're going to be doing there is white manufacturing. Yeah. It is now really, I think it's probably the banking hub.
It is. It's a banking hub. It's a tax haven, which has really put it on the map. Right. And just in case you don't know, entrepreneurs, if you're watching this, I know that many of you at some point are going to get to this Uber level where you have to really look at where you live for taxes. And what makes Singapore so unique is that if you've got $100 million that you want to park in Singapore, you can call a meeting with the Singaporean government and say, well, here's the scoop. I want to bring over 100 million, and I'm willing to give you, 7% one time. Or sorry, maybe you come back and say, I'm willing to give you 4% one time, and they'll come back and say, well, how about 8? And you say, well, how about 6? And then you say 7, and you got a deal, and you park your money there, and you become a Singaporean citizen, or your company does. So
modern negotiation is still alive and well, not only in Singapore but the whole Asia Pacific region. All of Asia.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate over the course of my career to really watch the whole Asian economic story come alive. I mean, Singapore was really the starting place, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to be there. and see it emerge. But what they did in Singapore became contagious, and it moved all over the Asia Pacific region. I mean, of course, Taiwan, without say, became a manufacturing hub for semiconductor technology. Hong Kong became a hub, although it's always been a hub for finance, became a short-term manufacturing hub until things started to move to China. Malaysia, Indonesia, the Korean Peninsula. I mean, I was very lucky as a young guy to experience all of those places. And when China began to emerge, I got to emerge with it. I made my first trip to China in 1986, when people were still walking around wearing Mao jackets. Yeah. And it was very restrictive in terms of what foreigners could do at that point in time. And of course, well, since that time, I've built 4 manufacturing facilities in China. Yeah. And just watching that culture change. So it's what happened in Singapore. Singapore really kind of kicked things off, but it spread all over. Of course, a place you're familiar with, the Philippines, became a semiconductor industry giant. Big time. And still remains that today. So it's been quite a ride for the last 35 plus years.
Yeah. So who are the giants country-wise, geographically, when it comes to semiconductors today? Is it like China and the Philippines or Taiwan?
Well, today, China has just dwarfed the rest of the world when it comes to semiconductor technology. The Philippines were huge. But, the Philippines used to boast that one of the reasons they were so successful is, and my numbers may be a little off right now because it's changed a little bit, but they used to estimate they graduated about 32,000 EEs and EEs and MEs every year. And, of course, they were great for servicing the semiconductor industry.
You want to explain what EEs and MEs are?
So electrical engineers, mechanical engineers. In China, Shanghai alone puts that many out in 1 year.
Right. I think China won the manufacturing war, if you will, or race, I guess is probably a better put, or maybe both. I think for a few reasons. One is, of course, inexpensive labor, the sheer size of their workforce, right? I mean, they're one of the biggest in the world, India and China, and then their deliberate, there's my little puppy, their deliberate devaluing of the currency, right? Keeping it down so that it made it even more inexpensive for people all over the world to manufacture in China. Would you agree?
Sure, I agree absolutely with that. But just like our friends in Singapore used to be, the Chinese are willing to negotiate. You can, I'll give you just one example. I wanted to build a factory in China, and I didn't want to pay to build a factory because semiconductor industry is basically, on the manufacturing side, is a capital-intense business.
Yeah.
Capital, it cost me $100 million in capital equipment just to put into a building. So the thought of paying for a manufacturing facility was not something I wanted to do. I went to the Chinese government and said, I need a 500,000 square foot factory and I want you to build it. I think there's somebody who wants a wall built too also lately, but one of our political friends. But no, and quite seriously, I went to the Chinese government and I said, what I want you to do is I want you to build me this facility and I will lease it back from you. And of course, at the time, this is around 2003, 2004 timeframe, they wanted to create jobs in the area of Dongguan, China, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive from Hong Kong. And they built me my 500,000 square foot factory, and I mean totally fitted out. Everything from air cons to, I had class 10,000 clean rooms in this factory, and we did a lease back on it, and it was the sweetest deal you could do. I mean, try doing that. Quite honestly, I hate to say it, but try doing that somewhere in this country.
Yeah, absolutely, it never happened.
Right.
Never happened. You brought up a good point, and that is, as you're watching the Jet Set Entrepreneur right now, one of my goals, besides introducing you to dynamic people that are doing incredible things is I really want to open your eyes. If you know me personally, you know that I have a brick and mortar business, hundreds and hundreds of employees, but yet I run my business from a cell phone from some of the most exotic places on the planet. I'm always kind of traveling the globe, living what I call the new wealth and freedom lifestyle. And so I really get a chance to see, what's going on all over the world. And if you're watching the Jet Set Entrepreneur or listening right now, there's a good chance you're in the U.S. because we have a huge base of people in the U.S., but you may be somewhere else in the world listening to this. And so you may be out there traveling, and I hope you are, but if you're not, I want to share with you kind of what's going on out there. And Harry, you made a really good point. I mean, now, granted, the Chinese government has some pretty ridiculous money. They're doing okay, but they're very, very pro-business. And you made a perfect example of it. So Singapore, took some actions, and they got into the manufacturing business. And then the rest of the region saw it and picked up on it, and they saw what was possible, and they went for it. And that kind of bold maverick, we'll call it entrepreneurship or whatever you want to call it, business methodology is pervasive throughout Asia, all of Asia. Right. And they got it, they got hungry, and they went for it. And we in the U.S. went to sleep. I mean, I hate to say that, but right, would you agree? Absolutely.
We went to that spirit was lost, and particularly, you'll hear, we're in a political season now. You hear a lot of people talk about job creations, bringing manufacturing jobs, but you've got to think about the kind of manufacturing jobs you want to bring back. These are no longer brick and mortar shovel ready jobs. These are technology jobs.
Yep.
And if you want to bring that kind of manufacturing back, you've got to train people again. In the Asia Pacific region, and I mean everywhere in the Asia Pacific region, they figured that out, and they have perpetuated it from country to country. I think one of the things I may have mentioned to you is a few years back, I set up a startup manufacturing facility in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And that was pure outcropping of, while I was running my company in Hong Kong and China, I was traveling to Vietnam, quite honestly, as a tourist. And I'll never forget, I was there with my wife, and I turned to my wife one day and I said, if I ever start another company, this is the place I'm going to start it.
Yeah.
And opportunity came up a few years later, and the next thing you know, I was spending 80% of my time in Vietnam.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, and that's why we're based in the Philippines. In the Philippines, our employees are hungry to get the work. They want it, And it's been very interesting to watch. We started a company almost a decade ago in the Philippines. And in the early days, when we started our business, the Filipinos were not terribly entrepreneurial. Now, they were in the respect, like, every 50 feet, you've got a little hut type liquor store, if you will, people cooking food. They are very entrepreneurial in that respect. But I'm talking about, like, creating real businesses, not to diminish those and say they're not real businesses, but I look at those a little bit more of like survival type businesses, but actually, building, real businesses. And so in the early days, they just wanted a job, and they were just very excited to be able to work with U.S. companies. They just couldn't believe that they actually had that opportunity. And then we've seen over the last several years, as broadband entered everyone's house in the Philippines and everyone's house in the world, we've seen them become very entrepreneurial. And so we've had to create programs to really kind of nurture that and respect that. Otherwise, we would just lose all our employees. So we've right. kind of built that into our training programs and stuff. And it's amazing to watch. And what I want you to know is that if you are watching this, if you haven't traveled much outside of where you live, the rest of the world is hungry, and I'm talking crazy hungry. And we are losing the race in the U.S. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, I think in a lot of ways it's not that we're losing the race, we've lost it. We're certainly not. We don't have the kind of economies like these other countries do. It's astounding. And I believe that the only thing that's really going to save the U.S., and I don't think the U.S. is going away, but if we really want to continue to be like a superpower, is it's going to take jobs. But Harry, I think that you really, put your finger on it. It's not. you got to be smart about these jobs. I mean, like the type of jobs that are going to be created. I mean, yes, there will be manufacturing jobs, but these are all, they're going to require major training. These are going to be higher level technology type jobs. I do believe that some manufacturing is coming back to the U.S., but that's that'll be because of robotics, but there'll be higher level people that'll be in those positions. It'll all be a result of training. And so I guess my long version of what I'm trying to articulate here is that I believe that the only real hope for the U.S. is entrepreneurs. I think that entrepreneurs are going to create those jobs.
Right, you're right. Entrepreneurs and a change in the tax code. Because the big exactly. Now the big myth right now is that people go to Asia just because it's cheap.
Right.
Quite honestly, in the high-tech manufacturing sector, labor is not cheap anymore. I mean, when you look at hourly rates in places like Korea, Japan, even in the metropolitan areas, Beijing, Shanghai, labor rates are very high. Singapore really doesn't do a lot of large-scale manufacturing. They still have some, but the labor rates are significantly higher. What's changed, particularly in the tech industry, and this applies to whether you're talking about the semiconductors or clean tech or other related industries, is that that automation has taken over. Now, to run a machine in a factory, it's just pushing a button, but what that machine does is pretty darn sophisticated, and the person standing in that machine isn't just a button pusher.
Right.
He's well-educated, well-experienced tech who's doing those kind of things. Yeah. And I think that's what people don't realize. And we're losing that technical know-how in this country daily. And there's quite honestly, I spent a lot of time with venture capitalists when I was looking to set up manufacturing facilities. And I'd always, approach the Sand Hill Road guys that I knew and people like that to see if they'd be interested. There's no stomach amongst the venture capital community for manufacturing, where in Asia Pacific, they want those jobs. And you can get government money and you can get local VC money in any one of those countries that'll step up and invest in manufacturing. Big difference.
And that's smart. And the wealth of the world's manufacturing is over there. It's like, duh, it does work. It's crazy, just crazy. Yeah. So I'll kind of wrap that thought up with saying, like, look, I don't mean to be a doomsayer here, but I think the one thing that the U.S. does have is we're bold innovators, and so I think we need to keep innovating and take a global view. There's nothing wrong with doing business all over the world. We live in a global economy right now, and to think that you are just in one place called the U.S. is just a completely myopic view.
But that's you just hit on one of the great points of the whole list. The U.S. is filled with great innovators.
Absolutely.
The challenge that we have is we innovate here, and then when it's time to manufacture it, we send it over there. And it's like, we can get around that if there's a will, but there's got to be a will.
It would take a huge shift. It would be pretty tough to do. Yeah. So okay. So let's go a little deeper here. So tell me about this. So you're in your mid to late 20s. You got dropped off in Singapore, and you're starting this manufacturing business. First of all, what was your background as far as your education? What did you study?
Out there. I actually have a master's degree in English literature and creative writing.
I love it. Well, but I mean, that shows that it's possible, right? I mean, you were not trained for this. You just went out there and did it.
Right. Well, I was once asked, I was speaking to a freshman class in college one time, and they asked me who are the three biggest influences on my business career. And I told them Plato, Shakespeare, and Camus.
That's hilarious. I love it.
And I got this look like, what companies do they run?
Right. That's great.
But no, I think, and to this day, I still speak often about this. I think there was tremendous value in a liberal arts education.
Yeah.
Sure, there are some things you miss out. You didn't take all those finance courses, so it's something that where you get the on-the-job training. You didn't learn about manufacturing, but you get an on-the-job training. But the thing I've always felt with liberal arts major is it causes you to think differently.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I've always found that that's been one of my big advantages, that I just think differently than your typical engineer or your.
And do you mind kind of giving me an example, like the thought process of how it differs?
You know, I mean, I hate to be cliche about this, but just the ability to think out of the box.
Yeah, I get
Not
that.
just think out of the box, destroy the box.
Yeah.
You know, for somebody who doesn't have all the constraints that sometimes an engineering degree gives you, you know, or a technical degree gives you, I don't know what's impossible.
I totally
Why
get
would everything be impossible?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And, you know, I always say what gave me my early success, I started my first business at 15, is I just didn't know that I couldn't do it. Like my parents, I was an only child. I didn't come with a rule book. And my parents encouraged me just to do whatever the heck I had in mind, all kinds of harebrained ideas, but, you know, some of them took off very early on. And I think the other thing, too, it sounds like you didn't have any preconceived notions. You were kind of a blank slate as far as, you know, how can we do this? You didn't have to be untaught.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've got, you know, I'll give the engineers and then a little bit of credit here in the sense that when I started out in the semiconductor industry, it truly was a fledgling industry. Mm-hmm. I mean, 1976, if you went around telling people that, hey, I'm working in semiconductors, they would go, huh?
Yeah, they have no clue.
What's a semiconductor? You know, we still had transistor radios back in those days.
Yeah, right.
So I really had an opportunity to grow up with it, and I got the added benefit of being shipped off to Asia because that's where it was happening. Mm-hmm. It wasn't happening in the U.S. It was happening in Asia, and I got to see it all, at least on the manufacturing side.
That's really cool. Now, you ended up eventually as a CEO of a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ, right? Right. And tell me a little bit more about that. Were they publicly traded before you started working with them? Well, first of all, let's start there. So were they public before you started working with them?
This particular company in particular was a publicly traded company headquartered in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. It's a semiconductor subcontract manufacturing operation. They were in need of a turnaround. Mm-hmm. Badly. Mm-hmm. They were a company that at one time had been very successful, but they lost the recipe. Mm-hmm. And the company was rapidly declining. They brought me in because I had some prior history, obviously, in this industry. And I can talk about that a little bit later if you like. But basically, they brought me in to turn the company around. And company had its revenues had dropped to about $90 million. Stock was trading at about 42 cents. All the manufacturing was in Hong Kong. And, you know, I realized that not only did I have to go turn the company around, I had to turn the whole culture of the company around, mm-hmm. which is really the greater challenge that you have to deal with. Sure. The interesting thing about that is, you know, I looked at what our costs were in manufacturing in Hong Kong. I said, this is something that we can't be doing for the long term. I'm giving you, of course, the abbreviated version of this, but basically I said, we've got to set something up in China. And that's when I negotiated the deal that I alluded to
the factory
a little bit ago.
The shareholders must have just, I mean, they must have gone crazy. I mean, what a brilliant idea. I mean, they must have just loved you.
They loved the idea of going to China. There were going to be a lot of challenges because there was a lot of pushback by our people in Hong Kong who were all afraid that their jobs were going to go to China. But, you know, we were talking about 2 hours away. So we later on were able to employ quite a number of the Hong Kong people at the China facility. Yeah. But you know, we had a tremendous amount of debt that had to be. We had basically a note that was coming due. It was a $100 million note at what was it, 12.75% at the time, and it was going to be due in 6 months. So I went out and negotiated a new $150 million note that wouldn't be due for 6 years, and I negotiated it at about 9.25%. Which was pretty good. We're talking about 2003 timeframe. Yeah. So we raised $150 million. We were 18 times oversubscribed, which was fantastic. Cool. That was going to help us basically get moving forward in China. They took the stock.
And they were a U.S. company. Yes.
No. They were a Chinese company.
Yeah, this was
they were a Hong Kong company.
Got it. Okay, cool.
We had U.S. operations. We were incorporated in the U.S. We had U.S. operations, which did both R&D as well as sales. And then in Hong Kong at the time, we were also doing R&D, Asia Pacific sales, and of course all our manufacturing.
Was the U.S. company public as well?
No. It was all it was all traded under basically out of Hong Kong, but on the NASDAQ.
Yeah.
We had a good run at it. We took the stock up to about a little over $4.50. We did. It did pretty well. But for me, it's a little bit of advice I can give people out there. When you're a turnaround guy or a startup guy, you always have to know when it's your time to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the kind of guy who gets bored when things start to stabilize.
Uh-huh.
And so I've always made it my business to leave when on the higher note, if you will.
Good.
Things are still going well.
Yeah.
And so I left that position, but for 5 years I had 4.5 years. I had a great run, got the company turned around. Unfortunately for the company, the management that followed me, that's a nice way of putting it. They blew it.
Yeah.
And but what we accomplished was incredible. And the thing that I really want to focus on that is the reason we were so successful during that period of time is we actually did change the entire culture inside the company. Something I practice something that I call peak performance.
Mm-hmm.
And when I go into companies, I establish what I call the peak performance initiative. And it goes back to what I was saying about thinking outside of the box
Mm-hmm.
and thinking differently. And during that period of time I was there, we created a peak performance initiative that allowed us to achieve in every single discipline in the company the kind of things that we wanted to achieve. And I would love to tell you that I was the sole creator of this, but the foundation of this idea really came from somebody who I admired tremendously, Pasquale Pastorio. Now, most people may not, if they're not in the tech industry, know who Pasquale Pastorio is.
Okay.
But he was the former CEO and chairman of ST Microsystems out of Italy.
Okay.
And Pasquale had a philosophy when he ran ST Micro that he called ST World. And he used to speak and talk about how you develop corporate cultures, particularly when you're dealing with multinational companies.
Yeah.
So you've got operations in Latin America, and you've got them in Asia and Europe and everything. And how do you get all those people sync together and thinking in one way? And he basically created some ideas that really I first learned about in the early 90s. And I just said, going forward, I'm just going to try to advance those ideas and improve on those ideas. And every company I ran after that, I carried his philosophy, but changed it in ways that I thought were better for the companies that I ran. And it was phenomenal. But amazing guy. If anybody has a chance to do a little background on Pasquale Pastorio, he's an impressive individual.
That's cool to check that out. I presume he's not around anymore? Is he still kicking?
He's quite elderly these days and long since retired.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. I love reading stories of turnarounds, and you're a turnaround guy. And I've had to turn around before on a much smaller level than that because, I'm more in the entrepreneurship space. But just about every turnaround story on a high level, big companies, big numbers, that I hear, there's always an underlying theme. The CEO always says something very similar to what you said, that they basically came in and changed the company culture.
Right.
It seems so important, and I suppose so, because in such a big company, your capital really is your human capital, isn't it? Exactly.
And you've got to change mindsets, and when you're doing a turnaround or a startup, and by the way, I'll tell you, I love doing startups much more than I do turnarounds.
Which is something you're doing these days. You're right. Consulting for startups.
Yeah, because let's face it, with a startup, it's a clean slate.
You're not screwed up. You don't have to start off screwed up.
There's no history that people have. You have the old scenario when you're doing turnarounds. those people who want to stay at the station, those who get one foot on the bus, and those who get on the bus. And you've got to sort that out pretty quickly.
Get a lot of pushback, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, much prefer to do startups and turnarounds.
That's cool. So tell us a little bit about the startups and turnarounds that you're working with today, and about that process.
Sure. It's you get to a point in your career where you want to sort of impart whatever wisdom you've managed to gain over all these years onto others. And so when I made the transition, moving from California to the Research Triangle area here in North Carolina, the one thing I knew I didn't want to do is I didn't want to go back to being a CEO again. I've done that. I've done it in basically every forum you can possibly do it in. And what I really wanted to do is find companies who I could work with. The pickings in the Research Triangle area, although it's pretty innovative, particularly when it comes to medical disciplines, is pretty small in terms of other technologies, although there is a robust clean tech community here. So one of the companies that I got involved with here, which I'm very happy with, and it's tough to get started, but they're doing some good things, is a company, I'm going to give them a cheap plug here, a company called Blue Gas Marine.
Okay.
And they're basically a company that looked at the CNG and LNG market as it relates to transportation, but not road transportation, marine transportation.
Now, what's CNG and LNG?
Compressed natural gas and liquefied natural gas.
Okay.
So very clean technologies. They burn 90% cleaner than regular gasoline or diesel burn. They're basically 3 to 4 times cheaper. And what they did is they developed their own design and capabilities for converting existing gasoline engines over to natural gas. They're a fledgling young company out there. We're trying to help them raise some money right now. They've raised over $1 million and have jump started this. Their marketing has been excellent. They're getting well known, but just like with road vehicles, it's been a challenge because if you think about it, it's a chicken and the egg story, right? Okay, so now you get these boats and you convert them to CNG and LNG. The problem is, where are the CNG and LNG stations?
Right.
Right.
And that requires hundreds of millions.
Infrastructure has to be put in place.
Yeah.
So you find out you come up with a novel idea.
Yeah.
But the next thing you find out is there's not an infrastructure to support it. But quite honestly, it's just a ton of fun.
Yeah.
And the guy who is running the company is doing a good job and continues to advance technology. And I think they'll be doing some big things in a few years from now.
Now, you mentioned that they do a pretty good job of marketing, and at the end of the day, look, life's about marketing, right? It's all about marketing, the way you market your business, the way you market to your kids, right? So I'm just curious, though, in that space, I mean, now we're really talking about the startup space. So I have kind of an idea of what I would consider good marketing in that space. Right. What type of marketing are they doing, and how is that?
Well, obviously they're doing a lot of digital marketing. They're obviously out on Twitter and Facebook and all those. But the people they have to reach, they really do have to do the trade show thing because
the dog and pony show.
Well, it's more than dog and pony show. In this case, when you think about it, it's marine vessels. So what they'll do is they'll go to the Miami Boat Show.
Okay.
Nothing better than taking a boat that has had its engines converted over to natural gas. Yeah. And drop it in the water and let people get on it and take it for a spin.
So then at the event, will they sell conversions?
They will sell conversions to people who want conversions, and they're working with boat engine manufacturers now, people like the Yamahas of the world and the Suzukis of the world, to convert their engines for customers who want natural gas over to natural gas. And let's face it, there's going to be a big clean tech push in this country. There already is. You're going to see that transfer itself over to the marine side of things, and I think these guys are going to have themselves positioned, because not only will it be good for the recreational boater, but think about commercial boating and how much gas those boats use and the cost that they use it at. Pretty amazing. So I'm very optimistic for this company.
That's pretty cool. And are they looking at grant money too? Because I would think, I know clean, there's been some things about clean, because there was like an avalanche of money that came in through the government. There was the government got burned on a few things, but I would presume there's some pretty good grant money for that.
They're starting to look for some grant money. The early money they raised really came from private investors.
Yeah.
They had to find people who were really believers.
Yeah.
The early investors were people who were really motivated by the fact that they wanted to see, it sounds like a rhyme here, but green marine.
Mm-hmm. They were passionate about it.
On the recreational level, think about it. If you're somebody who has ever gone skiing, you ever been behind a boat that's pulling you and the exhaust fumes that are coming out in your face when you're going? Well, now you've got something that burns 90% cleaner.
Yeah,
it's helping the environment. It costs less. You can't beat it.
Right. So they could easily catch the vision and.
Right.
Yeah. That's really cool. So Harry, tell us a little bit more about Dodging Bullets, Shooting Back, your new book.
I love writing this book, I have to tell you.
Yeah.
It is a book that takes advantage of metaphors and vignettes in sort of a tongue-in-cheek fashion to address some serious workplace issues. I'm sure what influenced me as I wrote this book was the fact that I was a big fan of Harvey Mackay back in the early 80s, Swim with the Sharks.
Yeah, it's cool going.
Mark McCormick's What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School.
Yeah.
And given that I only took a couple of courses at Harvard and didn't graduate from there, I recognize what they don't teach at Harvard Business School. Yeah. And Dodging Bullets, Shooting Back is really a book that looks at the corporate battlefield. I think there's a naivete out there, people really that don't know what takes place in business. And I use the metaphor of saying there's always somebody shooting for you, or there's always the need to take a shot at somebody.
Yeah.
And I embellish that a little bit by showing the type of shooters who are out there, what their characteristics are, and how you defend yourself against them, or how you use them effectively, depending on which side of the gun you're on. Mm-hmm. If you grind it down to its simplest terms, though, it really focuses on lower cost, lower risk, and higher profits. Mm-hmm. If you think about the business world and how you operate within it, those are really your three greatest objectives. You always want to lower your cost, you want to lower your risk, and you want to increase your profits. But one of the challenges in doing that is that there are always people taking shots at you. There are people taking shots at your idea. There are people who don't agree with your ideas that you have to take shots back at. And I think for the young kid coming out of college, or for that matter, even the seasoned executive who hasn't had many shots taken at him, mm-hmm. This book takes a really close look at the dynamics of the corporate culture and how you can survive through it and make it to the end. You always blindsided, which I always love. They go, I was blindsided. I didn't see that coming. My response to that is, then you weren't paying attention.
Sure.
But the reality is there's a lot of people who work in a lot of companies and they don't pay attention. Sure. And when you don't pay attention, you're going to take a bullet.
Absolutely. Cool metaphor. Yeah.
And so the book has a lot of fun with the concept. I allude to some of the old time westerns that many of us loved, and some of the movies that people care about. One of the quotes in the book comes from the movie The Matrix, and you may remember in that movie that Neo, of course, is the star. The Keanu Reeves role, is having a conversation with Morpheus, his mentor, so to speak. And he looks at Morpheus and he says, you mean I can dodge bullets? And Morpheus looks at him and says, no, I mean, once you learn, you won't have to. That's what this book is all about.
That's cool. I love it. I love it. That sounds awesome. Have you ever met Harvey McCabe before?
No, but believe it or not, I used to exchange letters with him. It shows how far back it's going. Back in the early '80s.
Pre-email.
Picked up the book. Swim with the Sharks. Yep. Loved it. Wrote him a letter. Wrote me one back. Of course, he's in Minnesota. My best friend at the time was a running back for the Minnesota Vikings. And we shared a couple of exchanges. He sent me a couple of his books with notes in them and signed and all that. And I actually just sent him a copy of my book.
Nice.
Yeah, I think Harvey's up around 81, 82.
But he's still kicking. He's still doing business. He looks great. I'll do an email intro. I'll connect the two of you.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. And so in your book, do you kind of, I'd love to hear and learn more about how you roll out these cultural changes within a company. Do you cover that in the book as well?
Not as deeply in this book. This book is really getting people to, what I'm really trying to get people to do is take a hard look at their companies and their overall business environment. Like I said, people don't pay attention anymore. I can tell I'm an old timer when I do this, but people are always thinking about the next move, but they're not aware of the moves that are happening around them at the moment.
Right.
And again, they get blindsided because of that. Yeah. And so I tell people how to be aware, how to look for those things. The signs are out there, and then how to play. And it's fun. I mean, the book itself ends on, I think, a very optimistic note. That just because you take a bullet now and then doesn't mean it's all over. Right. The whole idea is to use my favorite quote, which comes from that great philosopher Rocky Balboa. Mm-hmm. It's not about how hard you hit the guy in front of you. It's about how hard you can be hit and keep moving forward.
Love it. Another true, amazing entrepreneur, Sly Stallone. Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So, Harry, how do people get a copy of your book?
Right now, the best way to get my book is either through Amazon,
okay,
or through the C-Suite Book Club, where I'm a featured book.
Awesome. Dodging bullets, shooting back. I hope you've enjoyed our Jet Set Entrepreneur with Harry Rozakis. And Harry, I really enjoyed getting to know you better. And this was really awesome. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, congratulations. But what I do want you to know is that we only put about 40% of our content on iTunes. So the other 60%, the only way you can hear it is to actually be with us live on this webinar. And if you're not watching us live on the webinar, then you want to make sure to get in on that. And the way to do that is to go to davenmichaels.com. That's DAVENMICHAELS.com. Get yourself registered. Just add yourself to the list. And I have a ton of great business building strategies to share with you. But at the same time, you'll get notified when we go live on the Jet Set Entrepreneur. And once again, this is Daven Michaels. And with my new friend, Harry Rozakis, I look forward to getting to know you better, Harry, and doing some great things together. And I want to thank all of you for being with us on the Jet Set Entrepreneur. And until next time, this is Daven Michaels. Live your true life adventure. See you soon.